Thanks for being here. For those of you I've not met before, I'm JL Nave, founder of Nave Strategies, and we work with small and mid-sized orchestras on revenue growth and marketing strategy. My colleague Claudia Gage is here with me managing the back end side of things today. So if you have questions during the session, drop them in the chat and she'll collect them for Q&A at the end. In the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a tool called the Marketing Clarity Check. It's 4 questions. You can apply it to any marketing activity at your organization, any campaign, any channel, any tradition you've inherited and never questioned. And by the end of the session, you'll have a one-page version of this tool that you can run with your team right away. Here's the premise. Most small and mid-sized orchestras aren't struggling because they lack ideas or effort. They're struggling because they can't tell the difference between the activities that drive revenue and the ones that just create the feeling of productivity. There's a difference between being busy and being effective, and this tool will help you find that. Broad level, the 4 questions are: 1, the revenue test. Can you connect this activity directly to ticket revenue, donor dollars, or audience retention? 2, the dependency test. If you stop doing this tomorrow, would anyone who pays you money notice? 3, the proportionality test. Does the time this take match the return it produces? And 4, the pressure test. If this were proposed as a brand new idea today, would it survive a basic return on investment calculation? Any marketing activity that can't answer all 4 questions either gets cut, reduced, or redesigned. That's the standard. It sounds simple. It is simple. But I promise you, when you start running your current activities through these questions, the results will be clarifying and occasionally uncomfortable, but only in the best way. So let's start out with question 1. Question 1 is, can you connect this activity directly to ticket revenue, donor dollars, or audience retention? Question 1 is the revenue test, and it's the simplest question of the 4, which is exactly why it's the most dangerous one to skip. Let's talk about social media. Almost every orchestra in this room has a social media presence. Most of you are posting multiple times a week. Some of you have someone whose job description includes social media. You're creating content, scheduling it, responding to comments, tracking followers. My declaration is that most of that activity is failing the revenue test. Not because social media can't work, it absolutely can. But for the vast majority of small and mid-sized orchestras, nobody's ever asked whether it's working. It just keeps going because it's always been going. Here's what I want you to do right now. And you can just do this in your head. We're not going to ask you to share it publicly. I want you to think about your organization's social media activity over the last season. Now ask yourself, can you draw a line, even a rough one, between a specific post, campaign, or platform and a ticket sale or a donation? Not an impression, not a like, not a follower, a transaction. If the answer is yes, great. You are one of the few. Hold on to that and we'll talk about how to build on it. If the answer is no, or if you're not sure, that's not a social media problem. That's a measurement problem, and measurement problems are solvable. Here's what passing the revenue test actually requires. It does not require perfect attribution software or a data analyst. It requires 3 things: a trackable link, a consistent ask, and someone who checks whether the ask worked. That's it. So a UTM parameter on your ticket link, a promo code in your Insta bio, a comparison of sales volume on days you posted versus days you didn't. None of that requires a marketing department. It does, however, require intention. The reason why most social media activity fails this test isn't that social media is useless. It's that most organizations treat it as a broadcasting obligation rather than a revenue tool. They post because they feel like they should, not because they decided what they want social media to actually do for them. I want to show you what a social media strategy that passes the revenue test actually looks like. I'm not talking about a sophisticated attribution system. I'm talking about the minimum viable version, something any organization in this room could have in place in a week. Here is a real example. An orchestra puts their single ticket on sale date on a Saturday morning. They post on Instagram and Facebook at 9 a.m. with a direct link to the ticket page, not the home page, the ticket page. That link has a UTM parameter on it. Source equals Facebook, medium equals organic, campaign equals March-on sale. By Monday morning, they check their Google Analytics and see that 34 transactions came through that link. That's 34 tickets they can directly attribute to those two posts. That's it. That's what passing looks like. Not a marketing analytics dashboard, not a full-time social media manager, a link with a tag on it, a post with a clear ask, and someone who looked at the number on Monday morning. Now, here's the harder version of the same example. A different orchestra posts the same on sale announcement, but the link goes to their homepage. There's no UTM parameter. The post gets 47 likes and 12 shares. They sell 200 tickets that weekend. Did social media drive any of those sales? Maybe, and probably some, but they have no idea how many, which means they have no basis for deciding whether to invest more time in social media or less. They're flying blind and calling it a strategy. The difference between these two examples isn't talent or budget. It's a decision about what you want social media to do and whether you're willing to find out if it's doing it. So here's the standard. If you can't draw a line, even a rough one, between an activity and revenue, you have two choices. You either build the measurement system that lets you draw that line, or you deprioritize the activity until you can. What you don't do is keep going at the same pace and hope the line exists somewhere you just can't see it. That's the revenue test. One question, one standard. Does this activity connect to money? If not, it doesn't automatically get cut, but it goes on the list. So let's move on to question 2. If you stop doing this tomorrow, would anyone who pays you money notice? This is the dependency test and is the one that tends to produce the longest silence in the room. We are not talking about would your board miss it, or your staff, or your volunteers. Talking about anyone who pays you money, ticket buyers, donors, subscribers. Yes, some of them will be board members and volunteers, but these are the broader groups, ticket buyers, donors, and subscribers. And so I'd like to talk about your e-newsletter. I suspect most of you have one. You either send it weekly or every 2 weeks or monthly. Someone on your team, might even be you, spends real time writing it, designing it, proofing it, sending it, and then checking the open rate afterwards. It goes out faithfully season after season, year after year. My declaration is if you stopped sending your e-newsletter tomorrow, most of your ticket buyers would not notice for at least 30 days, and a significant number of them would never notice at all. Now, before anybody closes their laptop, I want to be very precise about what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I am not saying your newsletter has no value. I am not saying you should stop sending it. What I am saying, however, is that most newsletters, as currently designed, have never been tested against this question. They exist because they've always existed, and because nobody has ever asked what would actually happen if they stopped. I want to give you a real example. I work with an orchestra that believes deeply in their weekly newsletter, and they're right to. It's one of the primary vehicles they use to tell the stories of the orchestra, the musicians, the music, the mission. All of that is legitimate and it's worth protecting. But here's the question I ask them. Is the newsletter structured in a way that makes it easy for a reader to act, to buy a ticket, to renew, to donate? Or is it structured in a way that makes it easy for a reader to feel connected and then close the email? Those are different. Those are different newsletters, and both can coexist in the same email if you design it intentionally. So here's the structure I recommend for any regular e-newsletter, whatever your cadence is. Break it into 4 visual sections. First, lead with the first event happening this week or this month, whatever the most immediate time-sensitive ask is. Second, events coming up soon, so the next decision window. Third, the other upcoming events on the horizon. And then fourth, news from the organization, the storytelling, the mission content, the human interest material your audience actually reads. That structure does something important. It separates urgency from interest. The reader who opens your newsletter to find out what's happening this weekend can find it immediately in the first section without wading through 3 paragraphs about your music director's pet project. And the reader who opens it because they genuinely love your organization gets the story content they came for after the ask has already been made. So let me make this concrete with a before and after example. The newsletter that fails the dependency test looks kind of like this. It opens with a 300-word message from the executive director about the meaning of the season. Then there's a feature story about a musician's personal journey. Then somewhere in the middle, there's a paragraph that mentions the next concert is coming up. And at the very bottom, there's a button that says get tickets. The open rate is pretty decent, but the click-through rate on the ticket link is under 2%. Most people read the newsletter and close it out feeling vaguely warm about the organization, but 0 of them would change their ticket buying behavior if that newsletter stopped arriving. The newsletter that passes looks like this. The first thing a reader sees is the concert happening this weekend, the name, date, time, and a ticket link. Below that is a brief mention of what's coming up next in the next few weeks, and below that is the organization news and the musician story. The open rate might be similar, but the click-through rate on the ticket link is 8 to 12%. We're talking about the same content, same audience. The only thing that changed was where the concert appeared in the email. And that's a result you can defend. Most newsletters bury the ask in the middle of the storytelling, or worse, put all the storytelling first and the ticket link last. By then, half your readers have already moved on. Now, donor newsletters are a separate conversation because they serve a different purpose. The goal there is cultivation and stewardship, not immediate transaction. But the dependency test still applies. If you stopped sending your donor newsletter, would your donors give less? Would they feel less connected to the organization in such a way that actually affects their giving? If the answer is yes, it passes. If the honest answer is that your donors have no idea a newsletter exists and you suspect that's true, that's information worth knowing. Here's the standard. Ask the question honestly and answer it about your audience, not about your team. If stopping would change what your ticket buyers do, or what your donors give, or what your subscribers decide, it passes. If the most likely consequence is that your staff would feel less busy and your readers would feel vaguely less informed, it's time to redesign. Not necessarily to stop, but to rebuild it around a goal it can actually be measured against. So the goal here isn't to stop communicating. The goal is to communicate with intention and to know the difference between an email your audience reads because it serves them and an email your organization sends just because it's Tuesday. That's the dependency test. Let's move on to question 3. Does the time this take match the return it produces, or could reasonably produce? This is the proportionality test, and this is the question that tends to produce a different kind of reaction than the first two. Not silence, but recognition. I am imagining some slow nods out there, and maybe a couple of you are thinking, JL, I already know what you are about to say. And if that's the case, then let's have fun with it and talk about posters and flyers. Most of you have designed them, printed them, and put them up around town at some point in your organization's history. Some of you still do it every season. You create the artwork, or you pay someone to create it. You send it to a printer or print it in-house. You pick up the copies, you identify the coffee shops, the libraries, the community centers, the music stores, all of the places that will take them. You drive around town. You ask permission. You take them up. You come back 3 weeks later, and half of them have been taken down or covered by something else. Now, here's my grand declaration. Almost no orchestra has ever sold a meaningful number of tickets because of a poster in a coffee shop window. And before you push back, I want to ask you something. How would you know if they did? Is there a promo code on the poster, a unique URL, any mechanism at all that would tell you whether someone saw that poster and bought a ticket? For most organizations, the answer is no, which means you've been investing staff time, real, limited, precious staff time, in an activity whose return you have never measured and cannot measure with your current setup. That's a proportionality problem. Here's what makes this question different from the first two. The first question, the revenue test, asked whether line to money exists. The dependency test asks whether your audience would change their behavior without it. The proportionality test doesn't care about either of those things directly. It asks something simpler. Even if this activity has some value, is the value worth what it costs you to produce it? And the cost I'm talking about is almost never the printing bill. It's the staff hours. It's the creative energy. It's the opportunity cost, the thing that didn't get done because someone spent Tuesday afternoon driving around town with a stack of flyers. So let me put a number on it and walk through this honestly for your own organization. How many hours does your poster and flyer process take from start to finish? That's the design, the coordination, the printing, the distribution, the follow-up. Include everyone's time, not just the person who's doing the driving. Now, multiply those hours by whatever you would pay someone to do that work. Then ask, is there any real scenario in which that activity produced enough ticket revenue to justify that cost? For most organizations, when they actually do the math, the answer is no, not even close. Now, I want to be fair to the poster, our good friend, the poster. There are contexts where it makes sense. A community deeply anchored in physical public spaces, a concert that needs hyperlocal awareness in a specific neighborhood, a partnership with a venue that has genuine foot traffic from your target audience. In those cases, the poster is doing real work and the proportionality math might actually hold up. But that's not why most orchestras do it. Most orchestras do it because they've always done it, because it feels like marketing, because putting something physical in the world creates a sense of activity that a targeted email campaign doesn't, even if the email campaign sells 10 times more tickets. The proportionality test forces you to separate the feeling of marketing from the function of marketing. And those two things are not the same. Here's the standard. Take any activity that's consuming significant staff time and ask the question honestly. If we did the math right now, real hours, real cost, realistic return, would this survive? If yes, keep it and protect it. If no, either redesign it so the math does work or redirect that time to something where it does. What you don't want to do is keep doing it because it feels productive. Staff time is your scarcest resource. Should spend it like it is. And now let's move on to question 4. If this were proposed as a brand new idea today, would it survive a basic return on investment calculation? Question 4 is the pressure test. And this one is different from the first 3 in one important way. It's not primarily about activities you're already doing, it's about activities you're being asked to do, activities that arrive at your desk with momentum behind them, with a board member's name attached, with the music director's enthusiasm, and with the implicit message that saying no would be a bad move politically. And with that, I want to use this great example about billboards. I want to walk you through a conversation I've had more than once with orchestras I've worked with, and it goes something like this. A board member or a music director or a well meaning community leader comes forward with an idea. We need more visibility. People don't know we exist. We should do billboards at the airport. The belief underneath that idea is that awareness is the problem, that there are people in your community who would buy tickets to your orchestra if they only knew you existed, and that a billboard at the airport is the right way to reach them. So let's run the pressure test on that idea. A billboard campaign in an airport in a reasonable market for 1 year runs approximately $24,000. So that's the investment on the table. Your average single ticket price is $35. Here's the math. $24,000 divided by $35 equals 686 tickets. That billboard campaign has to directly sell 686 single tickets just to break even, not to build awareness, not generate goodwill. Sell 686 tickets, traceable, attributable tickets from people who saw the billboard and bought a seat. Now, your orchestra sells approximately 2,300 single tickets in a season. That means the billboard would need to account for nearly 30% of your entire single ticket volume to justify the cost from one awareness channel with no tracking mechanism to an audience of airport travelers who may or may not live in your market, may or may not attend live performance, and are almost certainly not thinking about concert tickets while they're trying to find their gate or pick up their luggage. When you put it that way, the proposal doesn't survive 5 minutes. But here's the thing, and this is the point of the pressure test. That math was always true. The numbers didn't change when I showed them on the screen. What changed is that someone finally asked the question. Someone finally ran the calculation that should have been run before the idea ever left the room it was born in. The pressure test exists because institutional inertia is real. Activities that have been done for years develop a kind of immunity to scrutiny. Nobody questions them because questioning them feels like criticizing the people who started them, or the organization's history, or even questioning the conventional wisdom of the field. And new ideas that arrive with powerful support develop a different kind of immunity, the political kind. Saying no to a board member's pet project requires more than a gut feeling. It requires math. That's what the pressure test gives you, math. Defensible, specific, unemotional math that you can put in front of anyone in the room, board member, music director, executive committee, whoever, and say, here is what this would need to produce in order to justify the investment. Can we agree on whether that's realistic? I want you to be take very close attention to this because I want you to notice what this question does and doesn't do. That question, can we agree on whether that's realistic? It doesn't say the idea is bad. It does not say the person who proposed it is wrong. It does say, let's agree on the standard before we agree on the spend. That's a completely different conversation and a much less political one. Now, the billboard example is an extreme case, and I use it because the math is so clear. But the pressure test applies to everything. The full page print ad in a publication, you're not sure how much of your audience actually reads. The radio campaign your board chair's company donated. The direct mail piece that cost $4 per household to produce and mail and has been done for generations. The sponsored social media post that your marketing manager isn't sure how to measure. Every one of those deserves the same question. If we propose this today, knowing what we know, how would it survive the math? Now, some of them will. Some of them will surprise you. The math holds up and you'll feel better about the investment than you did even before you asked. That's a good outcome too. The goal isn't to cut everything. The goal is to know which things are worth keeping. But the ones that don't survive, and there will be some, those are the activities where you're spending real money on the feeling of marketing rather than the function of marketing. And in an organization with limited resources, the feeling of marketing, I contend, is a luxury you can't afford. Here's the standard. Before any significant marketing expenditure gets approved, whether it's a new idea or a line item that's been in the budget for years, run the basic math. What does this need to produce to justify the cost? Is that realistic given our audience, our market, and our history? And if you can answer yes with confidence, spend the money. If you can't, however, either redesign the investment until the math works or redirect the budget to something where it does. The numbers were always there. You just have to ask them. So we have covered quite a bit in the last almost 40 minutes, and I want to bring us back to where we started. At the top of the session, all of you told me you couldn't name the three marketing activities that drove the most ticket revenue at your organization last season, at least not with data or confidence. And that's not where I want you to be at the end of next season. The marketing clarity check won't solve that problem overnight, but it gives you a place to start, a set of questions you can apply right now, this week, to the activities already on your plate. Not to cut everything, not to blow up what's working, but to stop defending what isn't working. Let me walk through the four questions one more time quickly because I want them to stick. The first question, the revenue test. Can you connect this activity directly to ticket revenue, donor dollars, or audience retention? If not, build the measurement system or deprioritize the activity. The dependency test. If you stop doing this tomorrow, would anyone who pays you money notice? If not, redesign it around a goal it can actually be measured against. The proportionality test. Does the time this take match the return it produces? If not, do the math honestly and redirect the hours to something where they earn their keep. And the pressure test. If this were proposed as a brand new idea today, would it survive a basic ROI calculation? If not, you now have the math to say so clearly, specifically, and without it being personal. Any activity that can't answer all four questions gets cut, reduced, or redesigned. That's the standard. And before I hand you this tool, I want to also say something directly to the people in this room who are probably already doing the math in their heads and starting to worry about what they're finding. So if you're sitting there thinking, I can't justify most of what we're doing right now, you're probably not alone. And if you're in an even more difficult position where you actually do know the numbers, and the numbers tell you that your organization isn't selling a lot of single tickets despite the volume of marketing it's producing, I want you to hear this clearly. That is not a marketing problem. That is a systems problem, and systems problems are solvable. Remember that volume is not the same as effectiveness. Most small orchestras are not under marketing, they're mismarketing, spending time and energy across too many activities, none of them with enough focus or measurement to know whether they're working. The answer to that is not to do more, and it's also not to do nothing. It's to do fewer things on purpose with a clear standard for what success looks like. That's what this tool is designed to help you find, not the things to cut, but the things worth keeping and doing better. Later today, Claudia is going to send an email with the one-page marketing clarity check tool attached. It's a clean, printable version of the four questions you can bring to your next team meeting, your next budget conversation, or your next planning session with your board. It's designed to work without any of the context from today's session. So you can hand it to a colleague who wasn't here, run it in a staff meeting, or even use it as a filter the next time someone walks into your office with a brilliant marketing idea that has a board member's name behind it. Take this tool, use it. And if it surfaces something you're not sure what to do with, that's why Claudia and I will be in Baltimore next week. Claudia and I will be at the Nave Strategies booth at the League Conference, June 1 through 3. Stop by. We'll walk through it. No pitch, just a good conversation. And the recording of today's session will be sent to everyone who registered within the next day or two. So if you want to revisit any of the examples or share the recording with a colleague who couldn't make it today, it'll be in your inbox soon. If today's session resonated with you and you want to go deeper, if you're looking for a more structured way to apply this kind of decision discipline across your entire marketing operation, not just one activity at a time, I'd encourage you to look into Growth Catalyst. It's a program Nave Strategies runs specifically for marketing and executive staff at small and mid-sized orchestras built around exactly this kind of decision architecture. Thanks for coming. Thanks for showing up the week before conference. And hopefully I'll see y'all in Baltimore next week. But if you want to continue any of these conversations in person, you know where to find us. And if you're not going to be in Baltimore, my email is on the screen. Send it. I read and respond to every one of them. So safe travels, everyone, and I hope to see you soon.